It's so exciting to be here, and thank you all for coming. It's really, can you hear me? Is it good? You have a wonderful city. I've been here before, and I was reminded today with this beautiful weather. And so thank you, WRI, and thank you all for coming. So, there's lots of things to talk about, but I decided that I would talk today about a new organizational structure that is changing the way we build businesses, the way we work in those businesses, and ultimately how we shape entire economies. And then I might do at the end a little bit about the future of self-driving cars, since I'm doing a lot of work on that today. But if I think about Zipcar, which I founded 17 years ago, and I had brown hair then, I think there are 3 reasons why we had a very high likelihood of success. And so the first of these is that we leveraged excess capacity, meaning the old way to consume a car, you had 2 choices. One, you would have to buy the entire car, which would cost about $9,000 a year or 6,000 euros, about 18% of the average household income, usually the most expensive thing or the second most expensive thing they buy, but they only use it 4% of the time. 96% of the time it is sitting idle. The other way you can consume a car is car rental, and you would buy it in 24-hour bundles, whether you wanted it for 2 hours or for 26 hours. So I knew that if I could sell someone a car just for an hour or for the exact amount of time they needed, I had the economic advantage because everyone in the system was buying more car than they needed. So we were leveraging this excess capacity. The economics were in my favor. The second thing we did is we built a platform for participation. So if you think about how you still get car rentals, that you stand in a long line, takes you 20 minutes, that would be totally impossible to do if you're going to rent a car for an hour. So I knew that we had to bring the customer right up close to the service, and we had to make what is a sort of complex effort very, very simple. The third thing we did is we thought of our customers as our collaborators and as our members. If you think about this car rental model again, that is very adversarial. So if I'm the car rental company, I'm on one side of the counter, you, the customers, are on the other side. I look at you and I think, oh, I know you're going to damage the car, you're going to do scratches, and you're never going to tell me about it. I definitely don't trust you. And you, customer, are looking at me on the other side of the counter, and you're saying, oh, you told me it was going to be this cheap price, and now you're trying to sell me a more expensive car, you want me to pay a lot for insurance, and if I don't fill up the tank, you're going to charge me a lot of money for the fuel, and I don't trust you either. So it's very adversarial. Zipcar took the counter away and said, we're all in this together. We're all going to together make this service. We're going to trust you to walk around the car and see if there's damage or not. We're going to leave a fuel card in the car, and you are going to fill it when it gets to a quarter tank or less. We're going to trust you with these things. You're going to tell us where are the right cars to buy, which are the right locations. And so we saw people as our collaborators. These 2 photos are, for me, examples of how closely we were with our members. These are people leaving the hospital with their firstborn children, and they're saying, oh, let's stop and take a photo for Zipcar. I can tell you that was not what I wanted to do when I was leaving the hospital. So we thought of them as collaborators and not as consumers. And if I say this word, and you're hearing it in Turkish, if I think of this word consumer, it sounds very 1950 to me. That today, I don't feel like a consumer. I'm not sitting back passively and waiting for everything to be done to me. I expect to be a participant, to be a collaborator, to help get things done. I found this cartoon recently, and so here is Moses coming down out of the mountain with the 10 Commandments, and the person says, is there a section on the bottom for comments? So even with God, I'm thinking I'm supposed to be collaborating. You know, I'm a participant. So it's these 3 elements, excess capacity, people, and platforms, that are the building blocks of this new organizational structure. And I'm calling it Peers Inc. People and platforms are inventing an entirely new collaborative economy and reinventing capitalism, and this is what I'll be talking about today. And if we look at all of these companies that we have talked about for the last 15 years and say, oh my gosh, what amazing companies, all of these companies have this exact organizational structure. And I put down the side here even more companies. So if we think of the free and open source movement, I see it as a peers in collaboration where we're leveraging and harnessing the interests of many engineers on a platform. If I think about massive online open courses, that's a peers in collaboration. Whenever we talk about crowdsourcing or crowdfunding or collaborative innovation, all of these are peers in collaborations. When we talk about the blockchain, that's actually peers in collaboration. So looking at this list, what is really an amazing example though, is think about Skype. Here is a telecommunications company that was built on my laptop with its video camera and my internet connection. All those things they got for free, and Skype is leveraging those to build a telecommunications company. If I think about this idea of excess capacity, it's fundamentally an act of sharing, because I'm not holding and controlling that whole asset for myself and having to share it with someone else. So if you're ever using excess capacity, it means that you're sharing. And my favorite example of this would be bed sharing. And I'm sure some of you in this audience do some bed sharing. I travel a lot, and so I do a lot of bed sharing. I like to stay at friends' houses when I am traveling. And I might be very lucky to use their home office that's also being shared as a bedroom. If I'm extra lucky, I get to have a double bed all to myself in my friend's house. If I'm very unlucky, they have the teenager, you're going to sleep on the couch, Robin will sleep on that bed, and I say, there's no way I want to do that, and so I go to a hotel. And so hotels are bed sharing. And when I was doing Zipcar, I would forbid my staff from calling it car sharing. I'd say, don't call it car sharing because, number one, no one knows what car sharing is. You still have to describe it. And number two, imagine if we called hotels bed sharing. They are the exact same business model as Zipcar. They're trying to get a return on asset over a 7-day week. And so tonight I'm sleeping in a bed sharing hotel. So I went to see, what is the largest bed sharing in the world? And the Intercontinental Hotels Group has been around for 65 years, 650,000 rooms in 100 countries. And we can know that that was a lot of work and a lot of effort, because we see Hilton has been around for 93 years, and they only had 610,000 rooms. And so you know what I'm going to say. There's a company, Airbnb, and in its 4th year had 650,000 rooms in 100 countries. And this is where I want to say, can you believe it? But can you believe it? In 4 years, they were able to outstrip an entire sector of the economy. So the question is, what happened, and how is that possible? And I will add here that Couchsurfing, in 9 years, had 2.5 million places to stay. It's phenomenal. I think I just added recently the market values of these companies as of March 2017. So Airbnb is maybe 7 years old now, 6 years old. It's worth $31 billion compared to these other old-fashioned companies that have been around for a long time. So the question is, what is going on, and how can we replicate that? So what is happening? If I think about why did we ever invent companies or governments or institutions? We invented them to do things that we as an individual couldn't do. And I think of these as industrial strengths, the things that I can't do. And so what are those things? Making large investments. It is going to be something that costs millions of dollars. I don't have millions of dollars. We have to start a company or an institution to do that. If it's going to be something that requires many, many kinds of expertise, I might be brilliant at 2 things. If it's going to take 10 things, we have to bring together a bunch of people and a government or a company to do that. If it's something that's going to require standards and standardization, I am one person. I can't force you and tell you to do something the same way every time. You don't care what I think. It has to have a bigger entity that is going to say, this is the way it's going to be every time. And typically, these ideas are kind of bound up in a brand promise, and often these entities are global. On the other side, individuals and small entities do things much better than big companies. And I want to, in this individual part, I want to say people individuals and local companies and smaller institutions. And what do they do better? Localization and customization and specialization. And if you think of the last 100 years of capitalism, of industrialization, it's been all about taking away the local and the customized and standardized so that we can have very standardized things sold in large volumes at a low price. And companies, big companies sometimes will do customization, localization, but they hate it. It costs a lot of money, they don't want to do it. So if I put these things together, they're in fact very, very complementary. Each of these have different and unique strengths. And what has changed is we now have the internet, which means that dealing with many small parts is no longer an issue. And so it's this brand new collaboration that's possible that I'm calling Peers Inc. And each side is able to bring the best of what they bring together. We have this brand new possibility of getting the best of both sides, both strengths. And so the Inc., the larger entity, is building a platform for participation, and the peers are delivering this diversity of offering. And if I think about this kind of complex mapping, I kind of bring it down to a yin and yang to say it's very complementary and symbiotic, and each side is leaving enough value on the table for the other side to want to participate. And it's all swimming in this sea of excess capacity. So I'm going to go through these points and give some examples. So why do I love working with excess capacity? Because it's very resource efficient, and I'm an environmentalist and I really care about that. And it's very cost efficient, which I like as a business person. And so how am I defining excess capacity? It's something that already exists, it's already been paid for, but there's more value there. And I profoundly hope by the end of this talk, you understand that excess capacity is not just physical assets. I want you to think about all kinds of things: virtual, experiential, networks, processes, times of day. It doesn't just have to be physical assets. So once you, as an entrepreneur, I want to say, go look for that excess capacity, seek that out, and then when you've found it, what do you do with it? So the first thing you can do is slice it, and that's what Zipcar did. It took a big asset, the car, and we let you just pay for it by the hour. So we now made it available in these small slices. Or you could aggregate it, and that's what Airbnb did. It took these million little small rooms around the world and put them all on one platform. And on that platform, they have one unique universal insurance product. And it means I can compare and contrast among the different types of bed and breakfast. So it has a totally different feel than a million bed and breakfasts. It's a much different product. And the third way you can deal with excess capacity is you can open it. And I would say this is actually the most exciting way, and it's to say, here's this excess capacity. What new ideas do you in the world have to do with this? And my example here would be the open data movement. So there's now been 40 countries that have opened up more than 1 million data sets, and McKinsey will say, you know what, there's $3 trillion worth of value there. And I just want you to think about that. This was data that the government collected for its own purposes, or the transit authority collected. They used it, they paid for it, they were happy, and it used to just sit in a filing drawer. And by making it open with standard open APIs, which would be the platform for participation, entrepreneurs from around the world are recombining that data in new ways. And my example here in the transportation, all of those smart apps that we're having on our transit apps on our phone are based on this open data. It's not as if this company, City Mapper, went and had to pay the transit authority and the bus guys and all the data they're pulling. They didn't have to go make that data and pay people for that data. They're going to one place and pulling it, and they just are doing the app. This is an example of the number of months since the launch of Uber in different cities. And I'm just showing it to show you that there's this exponential growth curve because they're leveraging excess capacity. And here is another example of excess capacity that I am quite fond of. It's a company called UShip. 25% of trucks are empty. And so they are matching up shippers and the people who want something shipped with this excess capacity. And they have moved, since they founded in 2006, 3.5 million customers, 388,000 service providers, and 5.7 million different shipments. And remember, they didn't have to buy any trucks or hire any truckers. This was all excess capacity on the roads today. So if I think about the Inc., what does the Inc. do? What does the big entity do? It builds this platform, and what does the platform deliver but platformness? And I think, you know, all those things that we love about a platform. It organizes all the small parts, it makes complex things very simple, and very importantly, it gives the power of the large to the small. And with that, we often have the opportunity to get economies of scale and have the chance for very high growth. A company that I love, and I'm friends with the founder, is called BlaBlaCar. And this growth curve is very typical for platform companies. They actually started in 2006, so it goes a longer tail. Platform companies are really hard to make. You have to keep working at it, working at it, working at it. If you manage to get it to work, you have this exponential growth curve. So today they are moving 4 million people every month, which is the same as would be moved by 10,000 trains or 10,000 planes. Yet imagine they move those 4 million people a month without laying one train track, without buying one car. All it is, they're harnessing this excess capacity on a platform for participation and inviting in everyone to do it. And I think I neglected to say that BlaBlaCar is excess capacity. It's me driving from Paris to Berlin in my own car with 3 empty seats, and I sell those seats. And so they are leveraging this existing asset that's already happening. Think about the peers. What do they deliver? They deliver diversity, and it's because we are now capturing this power of the diversity of peers that this business model beats every other business model. This diversity is what delivers the innovation and the resilience and the redundancy. My favorite example here would be smartphones and apps. So think about the smartphone. It is the platform. It is really hard to build smartphones and operating system. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars over many years, a really complicated thing to do. But if you think about the apps, many people in this room probably could build an app themselves. And in the 8 years since smartphones have been invented, we've seen over 2 million apps have been created. And if you think of those 10 years, I want to say this has got to be the most creative and explosion of innovation in the history of humans. And why? Because there was a very, very complex device that was opened up, and now thousands and tens of thousands of people around the world are bringing their own life experience and their own understanding of problems and saying, what would I do with this smartphone? So they're leveraging this excess capacity, and they're also leveraging the fact that I bought my expensive smartphone for $600 for maybe 4 or 5 killer apps. All of those other apps ideas, all of those other business models are free riders on my phone because I already had to pay for it. If I had to pay for it for their app, I would never, ever do it. So they're all using up the fact that I have this smartphone with extra excess capacity. Here is a slide of peer-to-peer car rental companies. So remember, I said that people's own cars are used 4% of the time and idle 96% of the time. So these are 4 companies around the world that are succeeding at it. WRI in Paris, it launched in 2010, has 38,000 cars. Getaround in the US, 2,500 cars. I want to be careful with these numbers, that when I look at this slide, which I found on Twitter, I am struck by how this slide is not telling you if they're successful or not. Right? This slide is telling you how much money they raised and how big the service offering is, but it is not telling you how many people are using the service. So I'm just pointing that out as a sneaky person. I know that story. If I think about this Peers Inc. model, what I adore about it is that it has these characteristics that are so incredible that I think of them as kind of like miracles. And before I tell you these miraculous pieces, I want to make you really depressed. And then after I've made you really depressed, I will tell you the good parts and you'll feel so happy. Okay? So ready to be really depressed. The most depressing thing I know is climate change. And just to orient you onto this map, these are the hottest years on record. And you can see that 2015 was a lot hotter than those previous years. And what is more shocking is that every single month of 2016 was hotter than that way hotter one. Scientists tell us that if we continue as we're doing today, we will see average global warming of 6 degrees centigrade. And if you're like me, you have no idea. What does it mean to warm a planet by 6 degrees? What does that actually feel like? How do I experience a warming of that amount? So my favorite example on this is if we went back when it was minus 4.5 degrees colder. That was the last ice age. 20,000 years ago, the planet was 4.5 degrees cooler. And if you want to know what it felt like 20,000 years ago, here's a picture of ice over the city skylines. This is Boston, where I sleep, and my bed would be here. Where I sleep at night is under 1.5 kilometers of ice. That is what it feels like to warm the planet just by 4.5 degrees, and that took 20,000 years. We are going forward that amount and more by 2,185 years. So if any of you are under the illusion that this is not a crisis and not an existential crisis, a new word that I finally learned what existential meant, it meant, will humans exist? Very likely not. So for me, every breath I take is how do I address this problem? And it should be all of our concerns. So I want you to just hold your anxiety now and remember this as we go forward, because I want you all to have that anxiety in your day jobs, in your life. So the question is, what will it look like? So my friend at Stanford said, you can't solve exponential problems with linear solutions. And I feel like that is how we are addressing climate change. We are doing these tiny, little, small changes. And I think, so I say, try Peers Inc. And so now for the miracles. And I know you're ready. Aren't you ready for miracles now? So number one, because we are leveraging excess capacity, we can defy the laws of physics. So imagine if in 2000, instead of saying, I'm going to invent Zipcar, I'd said, I'm going to build the largest hotel in the world. In 4 years, I'm going to build 650,000 rooms in 100 countries. Every single person in this room would say, that's physically impossible, Robin. You cannot go find the land, hire the architects, get it financed, build it, put the furniture in, staff it, have people come, make no mistakes, do it in 4 years. That is physically impossible. We would all be in agreement. And this is what business as usual asset building would look like over 6 years. And this is what Airbnb did. And why? Because they leveraged existing excess capacity on a platform for participation and said, everyone collaborate and help me get this done. So if I think about climate change and the pace at which we have to move, for me, this is the only structure. This is the only way we are going to get this problem solved. So, miracle number 2. Because we are building on platforms for participation, we can tap exponential learning. If we think about learning, it's the number of iterations I can do something. So I, as an individual, can get a certain number of iterations in my life. And as a company, we always think of companies on a faster learning curve. They can get more iterations. If you work on a platform and you pay attention, you get even more iterations. So my example here will be, how fast can you learn a foreign language? And the unit of measurement for learning a foreign language is 1 semester of university. What can you learn in a semester of university, which is 130 hours? It used to be that the best company in the world was the Rosetta Stone, and it would only take 54 hours. And if your boss was going to pay for it because it was very expensive, you would say, yes, I want to use the Rosetta Stone because it's so much faster than going to school for a semester. My new favorite company is Duolingo. And so Duolingo has got it down to 34 hours in which they will reliably teach you a university semester of language. And the question is, so the CEO tells me that every question of Duolingo is an A/B test. He asks half the people one way and half the people the other way. And in 24 hours, 150,000 people will have taken that test, and he'll know which is the better way to teach someone. And so he now has got it honed down to these 34 hours. And I say reliably because here's Duolingo's growth curve. They now have more than 50 million active members, people actively using the app every month. And so you can see it's the usual growth curve. It takes a while to get it to go, and then it goes up. And so I just want to point out, what was the excess capacity here? It was Robin's failure was the excess capacity. How I failed on exams has been thrown away for 58 years. No one cared how I failed on exams. Louis Van Aan of Duolingo said, you know what? There's some really important information to be gathered from that, and I'm going to improve my app doing that. I want to give you another example of excess capacity that he used. If you think about languages, French, my native tongue is English, and I want to learn Spanish. A year and a half ago, he opened up his processes and said, anyone can build language pairs on my platform, anyone in the world. Of those 50 million, 50% of the learners are learning language pairs Duolingo did not invent. It's amazing. Miracle number 3. Because we work with a diversity of peers, the right person will appear. And I don't mean Superman. I look at him and I think, you can fly and you're strong, so what? Everyone in this room is already better than Superman. You have your smartphone and you know who are the experts, what's the weather there, what's the best path to get there. We're all way better. But my example here would be Waze. This is a true story for me, but not this photograph. The day before Thanksgiving in the United States is the most traveled day in the year, and I was driving to my mother-in-law's house in a full car. And my husband is using Waze, driving me crazy, because I think, we have been to this house 200 times. Why are you using Waze? And it was a huge snowstorm. It was dropping this much snow in about 3 hours, so it was a very scary ride. And my son is in the front seat, and he said, look at that. And I thought, oh, maybe there's some deer running across the street. And I looked around, and there was a car accident immediately in front of us, and these 2 cars had hit, and they were doing this slow-motion slide off the snow. And Waze said, caution, accident ahead. And I thought, it was amazing. I was using Waze, and the car right next to me was using Waze and said, caution, accident ahead. So the key to remember is that Peers Inc. is a collaboration. None of these miracles can happen without the 2 sides collaborating. So we can't have exponential growth if we don't have the platform that's organizing and unleashing excess capacity and the peer co-investment. We can't tap exponential learning if we don't have the hundreds of thousands of crazy ways people do things and the platform doing the very serious analysis and saying, here's best practice, let me make that easier. Here's worst practice, stop doing it that way. And the right person will appear because I've got the platform that has attracted people and is doing all this crazy analysis and saying, here is the needle out of the haystack right this second. So, if I think about industrial capitalism, which I want to define as the old way of extracting the most value out of things. The old way of extracting the most value was to build a company with a very strong barrier around it. And you would build that barrier with patents and trademarks and copyrights and certifications, and it was very clear who was working for the company and who owned the assets and who didn't own the assets. And that used to be the way to extract the most value. Today, I think the way that we extract the most value is through the collaborative economy. And it has no hard edges. And is this asset owned by the company or not owned by the company? Does the person work for the company or not work for the company? Did the company collect that data, or is it some data from someplace else? It is all a big fuzzy mess. And I'm very convinced that this is the future economy for 4 reasons. And I will tell them to you, and if you agree with me that these 4 things are true, you too believe that the industrial capitalism is a thing of the past. So what has changed is now the internet does exist. It does exist. So if I think about assets, shared networked assets deliver more value than closed proprietary ones. And we know it happens 2 ways. 1, that asset is used more efficiently, or 2, brand new ways of extracting value are found on that asset. So shared networked assets always deliver more value than closed proprietary ones. If we think about people, everyone in this room, you guys know that you are incredibly smart, and you are. And we know that statistically, there are more smart people outside of this room. Now with the internet, we can go find those smart people out of the room. So more networked minds are smarter, more creative, more local, more customized, more specialized, more anything you want than anyone in a room or in a company or in a country. It's a fact. It's just a fact. If we think about the size of the opportunity and the benefits of shared open assets are larger than the problems associated with it. When I started Zipcar, people who did not invest would say, no, no, Robin, you can't do that because people will have car accidents and they will damage the car and they won't tell you. And you know what? A small fraction of people do damage the car, and it's a problem, and it's made obvious right away, and we penalize those people, and if they keep doing it, we kick them out. But we have 1 million people sharing 13,000 cars, which is a much larger benefit than the problems. And lastly, I'm a very selfish person. I don't care about anyone. I only do things for myself. When I participate in shared networked assets, I always get more than I give. So when I drive 3 hours with Zipcar in a month, I, Robin Chase, have access to 13,000 cars parked around the world. When I edit 2 lines of Wikipedia, I, Robin Chase, have access to the world's largest encyclopedia with 4.8 million entries. So I put in my little piece, and I get access to the entire whole piece. So if I think about the world that we're living in today, which is very scary because of climate change, we are wondering, is capitalism going to survive? What is the future of work and automation? What I know for sure is that this particular structure is the structure for very dynamic times because it enables us to experiment, iterate, adapt, and evolve at a very high pace at the lowest price. So I did write a book on this, and I'm going to now give you a part, and I'm very passionate about it, which is why it's partly about addressing climate change. I want to now just do something that doesn't match the first half, but I still want to talk about it, which is the future of transportation. We're about to have this enormous, imminent disruption. It'll happen at different speeds around the world, but the future of automated self-driving cars is upon us, and it will be built on 3 things: clean fuel cars, zero-emission cars that are shared, and ultimately they're autonomous. So I see this as a phased thing that is happening in the area of transportation. And I'm going to show you a 4-minute film, and my translator, who is an amazing person, is going to have a difficult time. But in these 4 minutes, it is really a concise synthesis of what I think is going to happen with this future. So here we go. I'm going to stand to the side.
Self-driving cars could make cities more livable, sustainable, equitable, and just. Fully automated self-driving cars will be available for sale in cities by 2020. They have very different economics than our current cars, and so won't fit in well with today's rules of play. I see 2 distinct possibilities for our automated car future: heaven or hell. We get to choose. Forward-thinking leadership is going to make all the difference. We get hell by taking a wait-and-see approach. In this future, people buy AVs instead of today's cars. For trips, once you get to your destination, instead of paying for parking downtown, it'll be cheaper to have your empty AV circle the block or drive back home. The same is true for stores. It could be cheaper to have a drugstore car drive to customers than to pay for retail space downtown. Today, 75% of all cars on the road have one occupant, the driver. In the future, as we add more cars operating with their different economics, 50% of the cars will have no people in them, running low-value errands or avoiding parking. Meanwhile, all the taxi, bus, shuttle, and truck drivers will lose their jobs. We'll also lose about 60% of our tax revenue that finances road infrastructure, because AVs are electric, don't park, and don't get parking tickets. Our roads and bridges get a whole lot worse. We definitely don't want the hell scenario. We get heaven by taking a proactive approach. Over 1 million people in U.S. cities are already car sharing. And in San Francisco, 50% of the people using ride-hailing apps now share their trips with another passenger who's a stranger. Instead of spending $9,000 a year on your own car, when we combine car sharing and ride-hailing and buy a seat in a shared autonomous vehicle, we can get door-to-door transport at the speed of private car travel for the cost of a subway ticket. This transforms people's access to opportunity. Car sharing eliminates the need for parking. Ride sharing reduces congestion. We will only need 10% of the cars we have in cities today, even at peak times. No more on-street parking, no more parking garages. If most of the AVs in cities are shared cars in which people can share trips. We can widen sidewalks, plant trees, put in bike lanes and benches. We can get rid of parking lots and build affordable housing, or public parks, or whatever. Establishing the criteria and priorities for newly available public land will be critical to making sure communities get what they need. We could also reduce air pollution and CO2 emissions as we move from gas to electric power for our cars, but only if we demand that this new incremental electric energy use be renewable. Happily, electric AVs will pay their fair share for road and bridge repair because we will have made and created new user fees that apply to them. We'll discourage empty zombie cars and make it more expensive to drive than to park. But wait, what about all those people who used to drive, repair cars, pump gas, design, and build cars for a living? They worked hard and their jobs disappeared almost overnight. We need to make sure that people can diversify their income with benefits that are portable and apply no matter how few hours you work. And we need to start piloting basic income. So if we want heaven and not hell, we have to start working together to get the right laws and regulations in place now, especially for the first cities that set the example. Just as your head is reeling from the impact and potential for self-driving cars, realize that this is just the tip of the big automation iceberg. Automation delivers enormous productivity gains without the associated labor. It's like making honey without the worker bees. How will we distribute this new kind of honey? Automation gives us reason to reconsider how, why, and where we tax, and to think anew about what kind of world we want to live in. So let's talk. Please contact me.
I have no time, and so I just wanted to end with, I'm doing a lot of work. Actually, let me just show you this slide, because this is interesting. This is a very traditional slide and much loved in the transportation sector. And so then I found this other one on Twitter, which was, oh wait, we're missing. I'll go forward. So here are 200 people and 177 cars, and we say, oh my gosh, that street is completely congested. Here's what that really looks like. So when you guys are thinking that we need to build more highways, I think there's other better solutions. And here is this thing that I found. So here is the space required for 60 people, a car, by Uber, and by autonomous vehicle. So it will look exactly the same unless we start putting more people in those vehicles. This is not the solution. So I just want to end with the work that what I think is going to happen in the future is that we are going to be, and we are starting now, doing a multimodal life. So sometimes I walk, sometimes I take a bike, sometimes I take a scooter, but we need to start creating a continuum of shared vehicle services from the heavy rail metro all the way up to a 4-passenger taxi car. And we need to make this feel like a continuum, and so that people can be using the right tool at the right time very, very easily. And it's going to be phased, so we can say, when are autonomous vehicles going to come to Turkey? For me, I don't care when they're going to come, and I don't care if it's going to happen in 3 years, which probably is going to happen in the US, and they'll be seeing them in 3 years, or 10, we still need to take the same approach, which is a phased approach. Number one, we have to open up the data that is being used for transportation, because transportation definitely tends towards monopoly. And by opening up the underlying data and making it shared, we let startups and local companies participate and compete against large multinationals. Number two, we need to start having zero-emission vehicles for shared fleets. Absolutely, we need to clean up the air in our cities. We need to start thinking about congestion. That when I was showing you the slides that the road looks congested, but there's only one person in the car, all of us who've been driving around in cars by themselves, and you are on the street next to the bus where everyone is standing like this, that is unfair. We need to be paying for the space that we take. And so the bus can be paying per square meter, but it has 90 people in it, and you will be paying for your 10.5 square meters of your car. And as I've been thinking about this, I also want to say, because you're human and you do own your country and you did live here, you get 1 square meter for yourself for free. The rest, I need you to pay during peak times. And lastly, when autonomous vehicles finally do come, they need to be in shared fleets and not owned by individuals. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.